Hello, and thank you for joining us as we reflect on today, Ash Wednesday. It might be helpful if you were to read today's readings, which are on the website for you to download before listening to this. But Norma will helpfully be reading any of the passages that I refer to as we go through.
Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice?
So ask the people in today's passage from the prophet Isaiah. We stand today at the beginning of a Lent like no other. Certainly none I've experienced before, nor I pray will we again. I'm not the first, nor I am sure will I be the last, to say that it feels like we've lived 12 months of Lent already. It feels a bit like Narnia, always winter and never Christmas. So, how should we fast this year? What should we give up for Lent? What should we do that God will notice? The answer which Isaiah gives on God's behalf is a harsh one.
Look, you fast only to quarrel, and to fight, and to strike with a wicked fist.
Does that aggression, born out of frustration which the people of Isaiah's time feel in fasting, does that not strike a chord? Is that not the way many of us feel after weeks of lockdown?
Such fasting will not make your voice heard on high.
So, how should we mark Lent this year, that our voice may be heard on high? This is how Isaiah answers.
Is this not the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke.
And then here's the phrase that leapt out at me when I first read it.
Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly.
And maybe for us today, is it not to share your medication with those too poor to buy it, your vaccines with those around the world who have none?
Then you shall call and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help and he will say, here I am.
Now, I understand absolutely that we as individuals do not have the medication and the vaccines that we can share, but our government does, and those of other rich nations of Europe do. And they will share them only if we act as their conscience. Though the Foreign Secretary did today call for global ceasefires around the world to allow those in war zones to be vaccinated. And that is definitely cause for hope. But what can we as individuals do under lockdown? Again, I believe the clues are in our readings. In 2 Corinthians.
As sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. As poor, yet making many rich. As having nothing, and yet possessing everything.
And yes, even under lockdown. And then in our gospel, the woman taken in adultery. We know the passage well. We know what the Pharisees are trying to do. But look what it tells us about Jesus. Woman, he says, where are they? Has no one condemned you?
No one, sir.
Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on do not sin again. Who else could say, as he is nailed to a cross, Father, forgive them. they know not what they do. Just over a week ago, I attended a preaching conference, online, of course, as is everything at the moment. The theme was how we preach through Lent during the pandemic. And one of the sessions was on those words, Father, forgive. It was given by Bishop Gully Francis Stachani, shortly to replace Stephen Cottrell as Bishop of Chelmsford. Now, she grew up in Iran, where her father was the Anglican bishop. They were persecuted during the Iranian Revolution. Her brother Bahram was murdered, and the remainder of the family fled to the UK. For Bahram's funeral, which he could not attend, her father wrote a prayer. It has become known as the Forgiveness Prayer. There's not time for me to read it all, but this will give you the essence.
O God, we remember not only Bahram, but also his murderers. Not because they killed him in the prime of his youth and made our hearts bleed and our tears flow, but because through their crime we now follow thy footsteps more closely in the way of sacrifice. It makes obvious as never before our need to trust in God's love as shown in the cross of Jesus and his resurrection. Love which makes us free from hate towards our persecutors. Love which brings patience, forbearance, courage, loyalty, humility, generosity of heart. Love which more than ever deepens our trust in God's final victory and his eternal designs for the church and for the world. Love which teaches us how to prepare ourselves to face our own day of death.
We now follow thy footsteps more closely in the way of sacrifice. Is that not how we should mark Lent this year? By following Christ's footsteps more closely in the way of sacrifice. Bishop Gully went on to say that though the word hope is never used in the prayer, yet it is suffused with the idea of hope. It defines forgiveness as the thing which frees us to trust and to love. The prayer seems to say that we need the pain and the suffering to fully comprehend the meaning of hope, and that the gateway between the two is forgiveness. So maybe this year we need to make Lent about forgiveness of those who have hurt us and the ones we love, those who we feel have forced us into lockdown, and maybe too about forgiveness of ourselves. Only that way can we be like Paul, as sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, as poor, yet making many rich, as having nothing, and yet possessing everything. Amen.
Amen.